Hello, and thanks for joining me today. So, if you caught part one of this mini series, you will have all of the page bases and the basic structure for all of the pages completed. And just to bring everybody else up to speed, if you haven't caught that first part, basically what I'm doing is taking the Spellbinders card kit of the month and creating a mini album from it. So in the first part of the mini series, I showed how to convert the 10 card bases that come in the card kit to 5 page bases for our mini album. So here's what we have. I'm using the card kit of the month from January 2020 called Love the Moment. And I've already gone ahead and cut apart the pattern paper that comes in the card kit. So this particular month's card kit came with a paper pad that had 40 sheets in it. And it comes with 20 different designs. They are single-sided, and it is paperweight, so not cardstock, not super thick, but great for layering, so it's perfect for this mini album. And because I already cut everything apart to make this video go faster, I did just want to talk through a couple of things since you won't see me actually doing it, but I did want to make mention. So the first thing I did was I took the paper pad and I basically tore out half of the paper pad, so 20 sheets, because my goal is to use all 20 unique designs and hopefully only the 20 sheets, so that leaves me half of the paper pad still so I can create cards or other projects with it. And once I had those 20 sheets, I looked through them all, and then I picked out a few that I thought might be good for the covers, spine, front cover, the spine, back cover, maybe the inside front and back covers as well. So I pulled those out just so that I can set them aside and sort of reserve them and not cut into them. So these are the 3 that I chose. And in the third part of this mini series is when I'll create the cover, the spine, and the hinge and complete this book. So you'll see these come up later. If you're going to kind of do the same thing that I did, of course you can, if you choose to do a project like this, you can always decorate it however you like, according to your personal taste or according to the taste of the individual you're gifting this to, if this is going to be a gift. But in my case, these are the 3 designs that I chose, so I'm setting those aside. And then for the rest, I basically figured out for the page structures that I created, there are essentially basically 3 main matted layer sizes that I need. So the first is for these gatefolds, this little half sheet. It measures 2 1/8 by 5 1/2. And so essentially the decorative design paper that layers on top of this, usually I go 1/4 of an inch smaller in both height and width, giving me a 1/8 border all around. And so that's one size. This size here ends up being 3 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall, so the matted layer is 3 inches by 5 1/4. And that's convenient because that's half of a 6 by 6 sheet of paper. If you're going to kind of make the most of your paper, since most, if not, I wouldn't say all, but most of the designer paper is going to be cut to 5 1/4 if you're choosing the same border width I am. And so what I do to make for the most efficient cut and have somewhat usable pieces left over is let's say this is your full 6x6 paper. What I do is at the bottom, and this is not directional, so it doesn't really matter, but if you have directional paper, you want to snip it from either the bottom or the top, whichever portion you want, and I can talk a little bit more about how to decide that. But cut off the 5 1/4 first. Make that your first cut so that you have this 3/4 of an inch strip left over, because this strip can be used elsewhere in the album. And as well, I'll show you another technique when we finish adhering all of our mats to our album pages for creating another background design just using these scraps. But if you were to say cut this to have your 3-inch width, let's say for this panel right here, you don't want to make the 3-inch cut and then cut across, because then you're not going to have as long of a strip at the bottom. So make your 5 1/4 cut first, and then that's going to give you a nice long 3 1/4 by 6-inch strip that you can then use. And there are 2 pages in this layout, in this mini album, that actually needs a piece that's 3 1/4 inches wide. So that's the other thing that's nice about that, because this is going to be perfect for that page. Now, some of the factors that you might want to consider in terms of whether you want to cut this off from the bottom or the top is, how things look both with the piece that's remaining and with the, maybe less important so, but with the piece that is going to be your 3/4 of an inch. Sometimes maybe cutting something off looks a little bit awkward, like if you had a pattern that, in this case, there isn't one like this, but if you had, let's say, a pattern that had images of people, and taking that little cut at the bottom would sort of cut somebody's head off or something, and it would look unusual, then maybe you want to cut from the other end. So just small things like that to consider. But with this particular paper pad, I found nothing really too unusual, and so most things you could cut pretty much from any edge. So kind of up to you on that, but something to consider. So let's just dig in. So I do have all of, as I mentioned, everything is already cut, so hopefully this will go through pretty quickly. So what I did was I pre-cut everything, and I also put double-sided adhesive on the backs of everything. So you can use whatever type of adhesive you like, including an ATG gun, liquid adhesive. I don't think you need something as strong or as expensive as score tape because this is really just decorative, and so it doesn't really need to be super strong, the adhesive that you're using. And I have kind of written myself notes. It's kind of nice using single-sided paper, because then you can, as you're designing things, you can kind of write on the back, and it's nice and legible. One thing that I also want to mention is the other common size as a matting layer is for this main panel. Recall that we're using A2 American standard size card bases. So that measures 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall. And so if you're using the same sort of border edging that I'm using, that means your matted layer is going to be 4 inches wide. So if you make that cut, you're going to end up with, this is a good example, a piece that's 2 inches wide. And so you can take this 2-inch, the 4-inch wide piece, and that can go there, and then the 2-inch wide piece can go on the gatefold. Technically, the 2-inch wide strip should be cut down to 1 inch and 7/8, 1 7/8 inch. That would be the 1/4 inch, less wide than the actual panel. But I figured it's hardly noticeable, and I'm actually okay with the difference in the border width. So it's not going to be super consistent, but that just saves me having to slice off just 1/8 of an inch from this edge, and that way I can just use the full inch strip here. So you can see this is what it looks like if you do cut it down. So you get nice even borders all around, but here's the piece where I did not cut it down, and you can see it's just ever so slightly wider, but that's hardly noticeable if you center it. So that's why I figure, I just won't bother making that extra cut to slice off that least little bit. So, but that's just something to note for you if you are want to be really precise about everything, then you should cut that down to 1 7/8. But if you're like me and want to save yourself a little bit of time and you don't mind slightly uneven borders, then go ahead and leave it at 2 inches. So that's totally up to you. And I'm going to show you, once I have all of these layers down, the pieces that are left over. So here's one finished panel. So you can kind of see there's going to be a white border all the way around. And I did make all these pencil markings here because I labeled all of these panels as I was designing, just to make sure that I had accounted for all of the pages and the designs for them. So just want to make sure that these line up. So one common layout that I'm using is on these gatefolds, because it works out so conveniently that you have a 4-inch panel and then essentially a 4-inch panel and a 2-inch panel. You can use the full 6x6 and kind of get the full effect of the pattern paper. So I like doing that. And then in this case with the gatefold, there's just an extra side panel that I'm using as a complementary. And definitely you can use, I forgot to burnish the other side, whatever adhesive you use, whether it's liquid or a dry adhesive, just make sure to give it a good burnish. That just helps ensure that the adhesive makes really good contact with the paper. And since we, or at least in my case, I'm not going to be putting heavy embellishments on, so I don't have to worry too much about using super strong adhesive. I just want to make sure it's got a really, strong stick. So giving it a good burnish gets all of the air bubbles out and just ensures that the adhesive is going to be at its fullest strength. But you can see that this album doesn't really take up too much paper. So I did use all of the card bases that come in the card kit, but using these economical cuts here, and for the particular design that I've chosen, it's really not too much in terms of the pattern paper because I still have half of the paper pad left. So, and that's a full 20 sheets. I mean, this is a very generous kit. There's quite a lot that comes in it, and just trying to figure out. There we go. Now, is this directional? Sometimes that's the hardest thing to figure out. I don't think it is. Well, maybe this looks more. I might have cut this. Maybe I want to do this. I think I intended originally for this to be cut so that I could use the full layout, but it looks like I might have miscut it because this is where I wish somebody was here so I can consult which way looks like it's up. I think this is up. But I cut it like this. Actually, I know how I can tell. So here is this is the cover to the paper pad. So I'm just referencing this. So this is there. Okay. This is up. Yeah, so I did miscut. So what I'm going to do is I might do this instead. So we'll see. The other thing that I was keeping in mind as I was designing was as you're flipping through these pages, you'll generally see 2 pages at a time. So you'll see the front of the next page and the back of the previous page. And so originally I designed this to look like that. And maybe this actually even looks better, and then I can put this on the inside and then it'll look like that. Okay, yep, I like that better. Actually, this works out better because this way, this feels more balanced, whereas this feels heavy because it's so dark with this pattern and there's only a small section of this. But once you open it, because there's a larger portion of the white, it looks a lot more balanced. Okay, well, that was a happy accident. Sometimes you just gotta roll with it. Sometimes because it's white on white, it might be hard to see where the edge is. So you can just get yourself like a little scrap piece of paper where you can more easily see the edge. That way, as you're trying to center your pattern paper, it's a little bit more clear. And then I'll put this one back here. So usually what I like to do is I'll get these decorative panels down first, and then I'll go back in and add embellishments. And so one of the reasons why I thought the Spellbinders Card Kits of the Month would be really great for mini albums and not just for cards is because it does come with so many ephemera die cuts, and those can really easily be used to add nice little touches to your album pages. And then you don't have to do any die cutting if that's not something that you're a big fan of, or if maybe you don't even own a die cutting machine. So one of the nice things about this particular double-sided adhesive tape that I'm using is it's pretty good. It's not super duper strong like score tape, but that means that if I have a little bit of a placement error, as long as I haven't pressed it down and burnished it, I can still very carefully lift it up. As long as it's just like barely touched the paper, it can still come back up. Okay, oh, this is nice. I kind of like how that turned out after all. Okay, so that's our first page signature. It's the front. And I'm going with an asymmetric gate. You could do it this way too, and then you'd have like a half and half, but I sort of like the look of the asymmetric look. So, okay, so I have the first page signature completed, and what I'm gonna go through and do is decorate up all of the rest of the page signatures, and I'll just put it on fast forward and put some music on so that you can just see the process, but it's pretty much the exact same as what I did here, so it doesn't really require that much explanation. So sit back and enjoy. Okay, so we have all of our base pages decorated. So page 1, turn that over, then you get that layout. Page 2 is just plain. And then this one, hard to tell on this, but I did go a little bit different where I put down some of the solid colored cardstock that came in the kit, and that piece I cut to the full size of this panel, and that way I think it kind of drew a little bit more attention in towards the butterfly, because there's so much white in the butterfly pattern paper that it was getting a little bit lost, and I really wanted to like focus in on this as a central piece. So while this is spread like across 2 pages, I think being able to kind of see it in full, because this is a 3-inch panel and this is a 3-inch panel, really makes it look nice and you can kind of appreciate everything. I did only lose like a little bit at the very bottom here because it's the matted layer is cut to 5 1/4, so 3/4 of an inch was cut off from the bottom, but I think that looks okay otherwise. And you might have noticed I was debating between putting the busier pattern on the inside and the kind of marbly pattern on the outside, but I kind of figured, because we just went from a sort of busy pattern to flip open to another busy pattern would be a bit much on the eyes, and so I thought, why not kind of give it something interesting to see but a little bit more restful, and then break up the busyness by pushing these two to the sides instead of putting them together in the center. And there's this I felt was a hard one to use, this paper, just because it just seems so plain, but it matches nicely with the black, so I did find a home for that. And then this paper is pretty. It's got a little bit of the gold foil. I really like how these layouts turned out. One thing you may have noticed is that I did intentionally cut this panel to be larger than this space because I did want it to tuck all the way into the pocket. If you're going to do that, it might be easier to go ahead and put that panel down before you glue the sides of the pocket onto the base page. That way you don't have to do what I did, which was I ended up, this panel is about 1/2 inch longer than it needs to be, so 1/2 inch tucks behind the pocket. And so since I had already adhered the pocket sides to the base page, I just mitered my decorative paper so that it could slip into this pocket. I had to do the same on this side too. This one fit a little bit nicer than this one. So it's not the end of the world if you don't adhere it first, but I think you'll find you'll get like a cleaner edge and a little bit less work if you put this decorative panel down first and then you put your pocket together on top of it. I'm just so used to making all of my structure elements first that I didn't really think ahead to that. The other thing to note is that I did not cover the back panel of this flap with decorative paper, so I hadn't planned for that, so I might have to figure out what I want to do there. And if I have, I don't think I have a section of paper that's large enough to cover it, but there may be a strategy that we can employ. But I do like how this turned out. To cover this top part, might have to do some paper piecing, but I kind of like using the one pattern and having it broken up a little bit by this. And this stripe pattern worked out just perfect to where when it's closed, you know, it almost seems like it's a solid, but really it's not. So I kind of like that aspect too. And then this layout, I don't know if you noticed in the sped up video, but I originally designed it kind of similar to this page, where initially I was going to put this inner panel on the outside to match this. I was going to do the exact same thing here as well. This was originally meant to go out here so that it kind of reflected, you know, the pattern over here. But I had remembered what we'd done earlier to recover from a different mistake. And so I thought, oh, let's just see how it looks if I take what was intended here and I put it on the outside and just swap those two panels. And I really like how that turned out, because now this almost looks like, just the way this pattern is, it almost looks like it's the other half of this, but it's not. It's actually a continuation from here, because this piece right here was cut from this edge right here. And I do think that it looks better this way, just as this looks better. You know, it's just a happy accident, but I think this looks better as well. And also it's a more interesting layout because, or more balanced in my eyes, because then it just seems like, oh, this is almost like a full panel, just like this is a full panel, except it's got a little bit of a division. And then when you open it, it still has that sort of reflection of this pattern all the way over to this edge, sort of borders this in and almost brings a little bit more focus to this. And in the same way, this works similarly, where this looks kind of unbalanced with this, but then opening it up, you kind of have that same pattern reflected on both sides, and that sort of makes this a little bit more central. So I do like how these happy accidents turn out in our favor sometimes. And then the last page signature is this. So yeah. Okay, so then now that we have our 5 page signatures completed, what I'm gonna do next is pull out some of the ephemera that I think might go with the whole mini album. And I did already select some, and so let me just kind of show you what I've got here, and then I might put things on fast motion again as you see me decorate. But let me just kind of show you some of the elements that I think might work well for a mini album. And this is only a fraction of the die cut ephemeras that come in this card kit, so I'm not hardly even pulling out like half of it, I don't think. But even at that, I doubt I can fit all of these into the mini album, so I'm not even going to use all of what's here. But I did pull out the all the florals, and I'm sure I might just try to stick to only using one of the 2 that you get. So for each die cut element that you get, they do give you 2 of each. So just for the sake of saving something for other projects, I might just try to stick to just using one copy, but we'll see. So I pulled out all of the florals, the butterflies, because I did use the butterfly as this central image here. And I wish they had more, because the butterflies are so pretty. It would have been nice to have more of these little die cuts. You get 4 of them, it looks like, and in 2 different sizes. And then I picked out some of the elements that had some sentiments on it. So a life lived is a life loved. Little things make for awesome days. I left behind the sentiments that I thought might be more easily used on a card. So that I can reserve those for card making, and then these I can include in the album. This one says beautiful chaos, live in the moment, wouldn't miss a moment, photo opportunity. Every picture has a story to tell. That one's perfect for albums. Without a care in the world, the time is now, carpe diem, special event, like a little ticket, this is my life. And then the other elements that I pulled out, which I think I will definitely use, are these kind of file folder tabs. So I'm gonna make, I don't know if you'll recall, but in part 1 we did set all of these up to be pocket pages. So I'm gonna make some photo mats, and then I can put these little tabs on the photo mat so that you can easily pull the mat out. So these are going to be perfect for that. And 2 of these pages, this page layout is a pocket that I'm intending on creating a tag so that I can slip it in. This is just scrap paper. A tag, and then have it kind of hold this back. So maybe this could be the, this is too short. So I might use these file folder tabs for that as well. So we'll see. But I'm gonna probably sort of put things on fast motion again, as this process can take, at least for me, some time as I deliberate what looks good and what doesn't. But let me just show you, just briefly talking through a little bit of my thinking as I start to do this. So one of the things that I'll be taking into consideration is, you know, what size photo can fit on the page that I'm decorating. And I want to make sure that whatever elements I'm adding to the page, I'm still going to be able to fit a photo there. So what I often use when I create mini albums is these little templates that are sort of some common photo sizes. I don't have an Instax, so but sometimes I do design for to fit these photos, because I know this is a very popular item. But since I think I might keep this album. I'm starting to fall in love with it. But other images or photo sizes that are pretty common are 3x4s, 2.5 by 3.5, and 2x3s. And so I personally use 3x4s and 4x6s a lot, and a 4x6 will not fit in this album without trimming, but a 3x4 will fit on this one of these full A2 size pages really nicely. So you can see it centers up really nicely and everything. So one of the things that I'm going to do as I start to embellish this is, let's say I want to put a flower in the corner here. For one, I'll probably line these with some heavy cardstock so that I can put just like a glue dot here, but leave the rest unattached from the page. And the glue dots are pretty strong, so they're gonna hold, that will hold this down pretty well. But I want to leave it open so that I can still tuck a photo behind there, and the photo will still fit on this page, with this as just a decorative element over the top of it, as opposed to if I glued everything down and I wanted to put a photo here, then the photo would have to go over that embellishment and it wouldn't quite look as nice. So by leaving it open, you can still kind of preserve the embellishment, and as well it's functional because it helps to hold your photo in, and then you can still have room to kind of fit a full size or the largest size photo that you can. So that's what I'll be doing. And the reason to reinforce it with some heavyweight cardstock is because this is just paper. If you're intending for something to be tucked behind it, I think that it would help to give it a little bit more strength so that A, it does hold down a photo nicely, but B, especially if you're giving this to somebody who may not be as aware, if they're like really pulling it back up a lot, that it's harder for them to kind of bend or tear or accidentally, put a crease in this element here. So by layering it onto some heavyweight cardstock, it's not going to make it like a chipboard element, but it will make it a little bit more sturdy. So that's going to be my plan. And I'll probably just flip through and see what fits where, and then just have a play at it. Okay, so I may not be 100% done, but for now I think I've pretty much got most of it. It's mostly there. I might take a second look and just see if there might be a couple more touches that I want to add. But You may have noticed I still had a lot of embellishments left on the table once I got to this point. I don't imagine that I'll use too many more, but I might go through and um, just pick some spots out where I might be able to tuck a couple more embellishments in. But let me show you where I'm at. So usually I treat the fronts of my gatefolds as purely decorative, so I didn't mind covering this up such that you can't, I mean, you still could put a photo over this, it just would cover everything, but I kind of see this as more decorative than anything, and I coupled the tag that says "without a care in the world," and then I added the little heart that says "laugh," so that it reads in full "laugh without a care in the world," which I think is a nice sort of way to alter this sentiment. And I just love bringing that gold heart into the sort of top portion of this tag because there's so much gold at the bottom that I felt it gave it a really nice balance. And it just so happened that the tag itself looks like it's on the same background as this piece right here. So I think that's a nice way of bringing this paper, this accent strip, into this panel here. I hated covering up this beautiful print, but I think it's worth it. And this is sort of, this is the first page, so it's the first thing that you'll see when you open the book as well. So I thought that made for a nice statement piece. And then you open it up and this tag here says Carpe Diem, and it has a definition of Carpe Diem. And this is open and you can tuck a photo under it. One of the things you might have noticed that I did was I was folding my glue dots in half, and that might not have been terribly obvious, but my glue dots are about 1/2 inch in diameter, which is a little bit on the larger side. So that's why I like to fold it in half. And then the other reason I like to fold in half is it also just gives it a little bit more dimension so that when you tuck something under it, it is already kind of, it's not so, held so close to the page that it's hard. So giving it that little extra dimension makes it easier to slip something under there. And so that's the other reason why I do it. But mostly it's just to make that glue dot a little bit smaller. I didn't know how else to decorate the two panels on the side, so I just left it plain. And then this layout, it would look like that. So I didn't want to do too much to this because it's so pretty, the paper, for one, and I'm imagining that there's going to be a photo here, and so I didn't want to put a tag or anything else because I kind of like the fact that it's all the same print. So I sort of left that there. You could also, if you didn't want your photo to be seen when the flap is closed, you could put a 2x3 photo just right up against the edge, and it would be hidden, and when you opened it, it would look like that. So that's also an option. But there's a photo here. So this says Beautiful Chaos. And then this is that sort of 2-page spread. I thought about making these two side panels purely decorative by putting these decorative elements just centered and glued straight down to the page, but then I gave it a second thought and figured these are 3-inch panels, so they do accommodate photos pretty well, and so I didn't want to just right out of the gates eliminate a photo placement opportunity. So so we didn't do that. For this piece, there was some really pretty sort of lilac cardstock that came in the kit, and so I backed it with that just so that it because it is the same image as these other flowers. or at least it's the same as one of these flowers in this print. And so I wanted it to kind of stand off of that a little bit better. So I backed it with the lilac cardstock. And then on this side, this one I backed with gold cardstock. And if I had thought about it, I would have actually tried to find a circle die that was slightly larger so that I could get a more perfect circle. But I'm not too sad by the imperfect hand cut circle, so I think it'll look okay. But had I to do it over again, I would actually die cut a circle to back this. I just didn't want to bring out my die cutting machine and all of that. So there's that. And then on this, you may have noticed that what I did was this leaf die cut was actually one piece, and then I cut a portion of it and then reassembled it so that it would kind of fit the way I wanted it to fit. And I think I used the other of that die cut. I'm trying to dig through my pile here to see if I did use it. But basically, I wanted a sort of a different arrangement of these leaves, and so I went ahead and just cut it and then placed my flower over it such that the flower would hide the cuts. So so always consider that if a die cut element isn't exactly how you want it positioned, you might be able to just give it a snip here or there and then reposition things the way that you want. So as an example, if you didn't like this leaf hanging out here, you could always kind of snip it off. And in a die cut like this where there is a white border all around, that does make it a little bit harder because you would have a little bit of that green. And so, as a result, it's better to kind of fussy cut all around so that you can get rid of the white edge. But you can always just alter things. And then if you wanted, you could take the part that you snipped off and then just like maybe tuck it behind here if you preferred to just have one little grouping of leaves. So always an option to kind of look at things a little bit differently and see if you want to make some alterations to the die cuts. And so then this flips out this way. This sentiment wouldn't miss a moment. I did glue this down straight onto the page because I figured it's small enough that, and it's so high up that it wouldn't be in the way of a photo getting placed there. So I don't mind that being, and it's so small, I don't mind that being glued down. And then this one I did leave open so that you can still tuck a photo behind it. One of the things I was trying to do when I was laying out this particular page is I wanted to use this element with this sentiment. Wouldn't miss a moment, the time is now. I kind of feel like both of those combined sort of capture this whole idea of, just live in the moment, live in the now, and kind of just appreciate what's going on now, and kind of take it all in. And so I wanted to use the two in combination, and I definitely wanted to use this because I thought it brought some of this coloring onto this page. But without thinking about it too much, I put the sentiment down over here, and technically I kind of wanted to put this element over here so that so the eye gets drawn straight all the way across if you're following this color with your eyes. And so it made it a little bit of a challenge because, if I had both the sentiment here, which was already glued down, and then I also glued this one over here, then it felt off balance because there was nothing on this side in terms of decorative elements. So as a compromise, I put it here putting it on in this corner felt too close to this and really didn't draw your eye into this panel that much. So just some things to kind of think about or consider when you're decorating your pages is just, creating paths for your eyes to follow. And one of the things is color. So generally, your eyes will sort of bounce from one color to the same color wherever else that happens to be. And in particular, since this background lilac color is so light, these darker colors stand out a little bit more and they just naturally draw your attention a little bit more. And so if you're trying to draw a person's eyes from, all the way this right edge to this edge, I think ideally, and I did not go to design school, so don't take my word for this, but, I think ideally it would have made more sense to put this element over here. That way your eye goes clear, from this corner up here all the way down to here, and in essence you will have kind of scanned the whole layout. But since we read top left to right, I had put this sentiment up here, and then I saw this element, and then I had to figure something else out. So, think there's no right or wrong, and it's just a matter of personal taste at the end of the day as well. So, that was that. This layout I did nothing with because I figured that the design intention of having the same image broken up into two pieces would be kind of spoiled if I put something on top of these two panels, and then when you lift up there isn't that much room behind here, but there is room. You could put a 2.5 by 3.5 photo and it would still be covered, but if I put any sort of decorative element, it would make it really hard to put a photo here. And so I just opted not to do anything on these two layouts. And then with this one, again, I glued this sentiment that says live in the moment straight down, and that's not going to be in the way of anything. And I put it at the bottom just to, change it up a little, because the other time I had a sentiment glued down, it was at the top. So I just wanted to get the eyes accustomed to just moving all around to look for interesting spots. And then this sentiment I really liked. It says every picture has a story to tell, and I just backed it onto some gold cardstock, which, by the way, the kit does come with gold cardstock, but I used some gold foil craft backed on craft paper cardstock that I have, because I just have these in it's a scrap pack that I got from Michael's. I think it's Recollections brand, and they're just nice small pieces that are perfect for this sort of thing, rather than cut into the nice 8.5 by 11 sheet that the card kit does have. But if you were doing this and you didn't have your own, it does come in the card kit, so that is there for you. But I figure this looks so perfect for completing this panel, because you can tuck a photo right under it and then it would just fill the full panel, which I think would look kind of neat. So, and I like that it sort of brings some of the gold over to this panel from here over there. So again, if you follow the gold foil, it takes you from this page all the way over to these extreme two corners, so essentially covering the full layout. And then the last one, this was a little bit I'm not sure I was totally successful, but have you ever seen those black and white photos where they've colored in just like one portion of the black and white photo and just that is in color? That was the look I was trying to go for here. And so I took this image, which was this originally. And again, here's where my suggestion of if something's not, working for you, just snip it and make it into what you want it to be. And so the original black and white image on this printed paper did have this flower in black and white. And so seeing that there was a die cut that pretty much was the exact same flower, roughly the same size and everything, I wanted to kind of go for that look where, you've got the black and white, but there's only one thing in color. And so what I did was I snipped off the leaves so that I could have the flower, because in the original black and white pattern paper, it has a leaf, but the leaf is there's one leaf going over top right here. And so I couldn't use the leaf that I cut off of this flower because there's, a section that would be missing. So I did have to use the second die cut that is just of the 3 leaves. That way I actually have a little stem that then looks like it's attached to the black and white pattern paper. It looks like it just extends right into that pattern paper. And so I don't know if I love it, but that was the look I was going for. If I could have done this without the leaves, I think I would have liked it better. But after fussy cutting around this flower, there is this odd portion right here where this leaf in particular is in front of the rest of these flowers here. So there would be like a gap, irregular looking gap. So it definitely needed to be covered up. And the original image did have a leaf drawn over it. So, it sort of follows the intention of the original design of the pattern paper. So I'm not that upset about it, but it's an interesting look. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, so then going into the gatefold, I like how this layout turned out, and it's the last page in the book too. So what I did here was this was a die cut, and I just backed it with gold. Again, that same gold foil craft paper that came out of my stash. And the original sentiment itself, that's just on the octagon reads, "Little things make for awesome days." And then I added the 2 little hearts that say, "Laugh today," which I kind of think, goes well with that sentiment, because it's just, just remembering to kind of laugh or smile on any given day. It's such a little thing, but it can really brighten your day. And so I thought that was a nice combination of sentiments. And then on this side, the sentiment reads, "A life lived is a life loved." So I thought that was really nice. And I really, really wanted to use the butterflies. So what I did here was I attached little glue dots, my smaller ones. I have some that are just, I think, 3 millimeters wide. And so those are on, here, let me point this way. So those are on just the body of the butterfly. And then with my 1/2 inch glue dots, I rolled them up so that they would have more dimension to them and be kind of thicker. So then that way the wings are popped up more than the body. So it just seems like, the wings are kind of coming off the page more. Because I didn't want to only glue down the body and have the wings potentially get snagged on something or bent, and I didn't want to back it onto some heavyweight cardstock and have to fussy cut around it. So I decided to just adhere it down, but roll up some glue so that some of the glue dots, so that it would have even more dimension and still have that look of the wings popping up off the page. And I thought that turned out pretty well. And there's this still is open at the bottom, so you can tuck a photo in and still have plenty of room for a photo there. So that is the decorating for this album. You can see that last page, because of the butterfly, it's got a lot of dimension there. So my next step is going to be to create the custom spine and the cover, or the custom hinge, the two covers, and the spine. And one of the reasons why I like to do this step first is exactly for the fact of being able to see how thick my pages are going to be. So one of the things that I love about creating your own custom hinge is that you can tailor it to your album design. And what I'm going to end up doing, and you'll see this in the next part of this video, is I am going to plan to add more space between this last page, which has that butterfly with the extra dimension, and the back cover, because all the other pages are fairly flat. There's not a lot of dimension going there. The only pages where I might give a little bit more of a gusset are these Z-fold pages, because already it's more pages because it's got the Z-fold, so it's a couple of extra layers of cardstock and pattern paper. But these are also the 3-inch panels that can hold more photos as well. So once the photos are in, that's going to be some extra thickness. So I'll give a little bit extra room here, a little bit of extra room here, especially since the gusset between these two has to accommodate both Z-folds. So this gusset here is going to be a little bit extra wide. And then the last gusset between the last page and the back cover, that will be a little bit extra wide. And then I think the rest can be fairly narrow gusset because there isn't that much going on the rest of the pages. So so that's one of the things that, if you're making your own custom hinge, as opposed to using a die, for example, because you can buy a die that will let you easily kind of fold and create a hidden hinge piece. But those tend to be all uniform, obviously, because the die will cut it the same every time. However, if your album is going to be on the thinner side, or there are some parts that need to be a little bit chunky, or maybe you want like an extra chunky album, being able to kind of create your own hidden hinge to accommodate your style and your particular album's needs is really a big plus. And I know die cutting a hinge is easy, but I'll show you how to create your own hinge, and you'll see it's actually not that much harder than die cutting one. Okay, so that'll be for next time, but when I do the final walkthrough of this album, you'll see if I did end up adding any extra embellishments or die cut ephemeras to these pages. So stay tuned. In part 3, I am going to finish this up and create the spine, cover, and put all of the pages into the book. Until then, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye!